Hi you guys, my name is Steven. I'd like to welcome you back to my calibration channel. I'd also like to welcome back Maddie and Carl, my two cosmology experts. Today I want to commemorate once again my hero, George Box. He's the guy that said all models are wrong, but some are useful. I want to apply this same concept to the idea of artificial intelligence. I want to see what happens when we say all data is biased, but some data is useful. Now I love this George Box quote because it places the responsibility for system outcomes right where it belongs, on us humans. Humans own all system outcomes whether we like it or not. So it's up to us to decide what do we mean by useful data, or what do we mean by biased data as we go about whatever goals we've set for ourselves. And these days we have to keep a very firm grip on these fundamentals because we're being promised heaven on earth if we'll just run over and start using these new exciting algorithmic tools. The word data comes to us all the way from the Latin, from a word that means that which is given. So to me that means it's a perfect place to start talking about biased data because we know that no data ever comes to us free from strings or bias. To me, it would make a lot more sense to call the stuff that we call data by some other word like extract, or any word that indicated to us that every day we're at the heart of the creation of data, the acquisition of data, and the processing of data. We are not passive recipients of some gift from somewhere else. Now, by now you must all know how much I love to do thought experiments. So let's extract a single data point and talk about how profoundly it's biased. Here's a point right here. Let's say it represents the temperature of water in a boiler that we want very much to control because it's for our own safety. And actually temperature is a great place to kick around some of these ideas because temperature is an idea and concept that we use every single day, and yet it is quite abstract and quite virtual. Now we might start by saying that temperature is just an attribute of molecular motion. Okay, but does that mean that adjacent molecules in a gas or a solid are at exactly the same temperature because they're so close together? We know that's not true. And yet we insist on attaching the concept of data to an arbitrarily small and convenient region that we happen to be interested in. Now we insist on doing it because it works for us. Clearly, temperature is a statistical concept from its very beginning and throughout its use. And statistics is in turn our way of dealing with the risks associated with uncertainty. Now these ideas about temperature have worked very well for us for a long time, or we would have ditched them for something better, even though we know for a fact that no temperature measurement can ever be perfect. Now this fact requires that we stay very grounded in practical reality. This temperature data point is the direct result of a deliberate, painful, expensive, and extensive engineering effort. It's crazy to hope that this point throughout all these evolutions and transitions was ever unbiased to begin with, or has retained that unbiased quality as it arrives here today. And this is long before we do anything to process this point ourselves for whatever temporary strategic goal we might have. Now, even at this point, an AI enthusiast might still try to maintain that this point is raw in the sense of being as yet untouched or unprocessed, or is in any state that someone might call pure or natural. What I'm trying to say in this video is that that position is absurd. But the temptation to make that leap and to hold that position has gotten a lot stronger recently in the face of the wonderful promise of AI tools that are lying under the Christmas tree. Now in wilder moments, people are starting to promise that we can do away with the drudgery of worrying about the details of causality or correlation, or even going to the effort to formulate a theory before we test it. All we have to do is toss a ton of data into the AI hopper and out comes AI wisdom. and quickly too. But can there ever be enough data that would allow us to stop being concerned about data quality? And hey, while we're at it, AI says we can get rid of statistical analysis altogether because it's such a pain in the ass. To confuse things, there's another layer that often gets added right here. And that's to think that this point, or the sample space from which we extracted this point, could ever be in any sense timeless. Temperature especially is a concept that's very much bound in time. Now I can say that because as a calibrator, I know for a fact that successive attempts to estimate the value of this point are going to produce a spread of data if we have the proper measurement resolution. Now at first we might just dismiss that and say, oh, that's just normal variation. However, over time, as we continue to estimate the value of this point, we're going to be forced sooner or later to acknowledge that there's a time structure to this data set. The corollary to this inevitable fact is to realize that hiding, masking, or offsetting this time trend is going to get more and more difficult and more expensive as the data set enlarges. That is, if we're still trying to prove that we can produce a data set that has no time structure to it. This approach has a wonderful place in our history. We humans have a long and glorious tradition of believing that all abstract concepts can be seen to exist apart from the effects that time has on them. This belief has been very helpful and even critical at times in the past when we needed to consider a challenging concept in the simplest possible framework from which all distractions had been removed. We just call this science in a box. We do it all the time. In fact, this was a critical element to the beginnings of the scientific revolution. That's what allowed Sir Isaac Newton to describe for the rest of us his ideas on how to define gravity, complete with a wonderful and simple equation. He considered and then defined gravity in the complete absence of time, and his equation reflects that quite simply. In fact, if you look at Newton's equation, we would be very safe in concluding that the universe works the same running backwards as forwards. But this is very much not the frame of mind we want to be in as we try and learn what do we mean by data today in the face of the growing influence of artificial intelligence. Nor should we default to retaining this idea just because of old habits or traditions or laziness or the fact that it's worked in the past. We would be placing ourselves in a very dangerous position indeed if at this moment we were to try to assure ourselves that data could ever be pure, raw, unbiased, or uncorrupted just before we toss a few terabytes of temperature data into an AI input hopper. Now, I use the word danger deliberately because we're about to create a whole lot of extra space between our inputs and our outputs. That's going to give people the opportunity to give up responsibilities that they have no right or ability to surrender. This danger has extra moral and physical dimensions just when some of us are getting ready to say, we'll let machines do for us what we think we can no longer do for ourselves. We're going to continue to face this danger until we get so good at producing AI that we could produce AI that would on its own choose to produce the same warning I'm producing in this video. That'll be the day when we can give up our responsibilities to any other entity. Now I'll give you a hint. I don't think that day is here yet. I'm really enjoying making these videos more and more. This one was strongly influenced by the work of two really smart people, Lee Smolin and Nick Barrowman. Now let me concentrate on Nick Barrowman. Nick Barrowman is that rarest of phenomenons. He's a statistician who's willing to put down his axe long enough to help amateurs such as ourselves try and figure out what are statisticians saying at the moment. His writing is beautifully clear, thought-provoking, and timely. I caught up with two articles that he's written recently called Why Data is Never Raw and Correlation, Causality, and Confusion. These are wonderful, timely articles Speaking of time, I'd like to thank you for your time and your patience.